So I work with open access at Qatar National Library. And like me, many in Qatar have been working on this for over 10 years. And we always wanted to have a conference in Qatar that talks about open research and open science. I'm happy to say that today is the day. With that sentiment, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. Professor Hilal Lashuel is the Research Development and Innovation Advisor to the Chairperson of Qatar Foundation and Executive Director of RDI at the Chairperson's Office. Dr. Hilal, please welcome to the stage.
Thank you very much, Walid, for the opportunity to be with you here today. I just would like to start first with a disclaimer, and the disclaimer is that I am not an open science expert. So you may ask the question is why I'm here, and there are three reasons for this. The first one is this is definitely my favorite place in Doha, Qatar National Library, and the second one is I can never say no to the QNL team. And the third reason I'm really here to deliver a few messages. One is that open research is important, but humanizing research, ensuring rigor, integrity, and reproducibility research is crucial to delivering the impact of open science and research. And three, what I would like to leave you with is the idea that we're probably today very well positioned, and there is a sense of urgency that we move from being simply people who adopt open science practices to people who maybe participate in the frontiers of innovation in this field. The third reason, and the main reason, was really the title of the conference. Very often when we talk about open science, the dominant theme is usually open access. And I was intrigued by the title of Transforming Knowledge into Action. And when I read the description or the goal of the conference this year, it says mainly three things that I wanted to highlight. One is addressing practical needs of the region and offering actionable insight and guidance to develop and implement open science policies and practice. What I hope to see in the future conferences is injecting the word of innovation, that we need to be also equally leading in that. When we talk about transforming knowledge into education, we need to pay attention to what's knowledge and what's the quality of knowledge. The quality of knowledge, the rigor in knowledge, the reliability of the knowledge is the most important factors that will determine the impact of the actions. And if I have a recommendation for next year's conference, you may want to expand it to action, solution, and impact. Ultimately, it is the impact that we do that matters when it comes to open science. So this is briefly the outline of my talk today. What I would like to start is by giving, going overemphasizing that open access is not usually means open science, and open science is not actually equal to open research. And then I'd like to talk about the concept of humanizing research as an important element of open research and going beyond open access. And then I'll focus on the third part in this importance of this rigor and integrity of research in the context of open research. And the second part of the talk, what I would like to do is talk about open research in the region and opportunities to innovate that maybe we should think about. So when we think of open science, there are many definitions of open science. Definitions matters. They matter because they end up driving the implementation priorities. And if we read this definition that was released by the White House Office of Science and Technology and Policy, it's a principle and practice of making research products and process. Very often we focus on the product and forget the process available to all, while respecting diverse cultures, maintaining security and privacy, and fostering collaboration, reproducibility, and equity. And I'll come back to this. And again, the discussion and debates in open research is usually dominated by the themes highlighted in black and less and what's in red, which is what's relevant for impact and significance. So open science can take many forms, and it has been highlighted in the previous opening remarks. These are the different practices that can fall under open science. But the most important thing is for what? What's the impact, the desired impact? It's the greater societal impact. How do we make science and research more responsive to society needs? And how it can support the pursuit of solution to societal challenges? How can open science and research drive policy? And how can we achieve maximum societal impact? Unfortunately, today, and this is an opportunity for the people working here, there isn't a good way for measuring the impact of open science in society. If we look at the key pillars of open science as defined in this diagram, which was produced by the UNESCO, what you see is that it's divided into different elements. There's one that deals in green with the scientific process. There is, of course, the importance of building the right infrastructure to support open research. And there is an element that the need for societal engagement to drive this process. And then the constant dialogue with other knowledge and systems. What you often see is that when we deal with open science, we tend to deal with part of this process, whether it's access, whether it's reproducibility, each in separate element. But most importantly, for the second part of my talk is the link between science and society. Very often when institutions and academic emphasize the importance of interacting with the community, it's usually a bidirectional, a single direction, that we need to inform the community of what we're doing. And instead, it should be a partnership, and that the community and interaction with society is important in driving not only the way the science, but the way we do science. So I said I'm not an expert, but I'm a passionate champion of open science, and I'd like to take a minute to share with you sort of a personal journey through a patient collaboration to open science. I've been working in the field of human diseases since 1997, and in neurodegenerative diseases since 2002, okay? It wasn't until about 2012 that I first met a patient. So every year we publish 5 to 10 papers, and we start the paper by talking about Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, systemic amyloidosis, and why what we're doing is so important to treat this patient, but we never met a patient. In fact, maybe this is true still today for 90% of PhD students and most scientists working in the lab. One of the areas I work in is the area of Huntington disease. And for 13 years, my lab was supported by this called Cure Huntington Disease Foundation. And every year what they did is organize a conference at the end of the year. Huntington disease is a neurodegenerative disease. It's a progressive movement disorder disease where what you can see that affects the part of the brain that controls voluntary movement and cognition. So people who have Huntington disease have very difficulty of controlling voluntary movement. They have psychiatric symptoms, and they also suffer from some cognitive. It's a devastating disease that can hit people from the age of 30 up, and today we don't have a cure. So it was first at one of these conferences that every year at this conference, they bring a patient or a patient family to talk about this. And it was the first introduction to humanizing the research we're doing in interaction with the disease. It turns out that the gene that caused this disease was discovered in Colombia. And a group of researchers went there because there is a concentration of this gene in families. But since then, it has shaped our research all over the world. But the people who were affected by disease were all forgotten. The communities that helped us discover this disease don't have even enough money to feed themselves. So one of my colleagues, who was the vice president of research at the CHDI, came up with the idea of, he's been an advocate of this community, of why not go to Colombia and organize a conference in Colombia where we can bring the researchers, the clinicians, the advocates, and the families together in one place. And actually we did. I was one of the co-organizers of this. And the basic premise for us is when you work with a disease, the best expert of the disease are not the scientists. They're actually the patients. And we spent a week in the same hotel, in the same lunchroom, listening to them and them listening to us, spending time not only with them, but also with their family. It was the most emotional, inspirational, and humbling experience for me. We also met, also at the same time, it was for the first time with me that I visited the Huntington disease clinic, sat down with a neurologist for an entire day while he was examining, diagnosing, and treating Huntington patients throughout the day. What did I learn from this? I learned a few things. One is the patients have tremendous respect of science and scientists. They look at us as gods. They think we have the cures. It was just amazing how they were embracing us and looking up to us and listening to us. The second thing is, as I looked at these patients, I realized that every single patient has a different disease. We label them the same, and this is turning out to be the case now for all diseases, diabetes, Alzheimer's. These are not single diseases. These are diseases that affect each individual differently, and that's why they manifest in very different types of systems. From a scientist's point of view, I've been working to try to cure this disease by looking at one protein. So it made me rethink my approach to science, that if this disease is so heterogeneous, we need to step back and we need to take a more holistic approach. So it began to transform how we think about what we do in science. But the most important lesson I learned from there is how every one of these people was desperate for a cure, was desperate for a treatment. And what that taught me is that as researchers, what we do is important, but how we do it is more important. How efficient do we do it? How transparent do we do it? And how reproducible do we do the science? And how fast we transfer our knowledge and tools to the rest of the community to be able to make an impact. So the first thing what I did when I came back is we met with the team and we came up with what we call our own Open Science Manifesto. And basically what this Open Science says is that every time we will produce a paper, it will go online before it's accepted. So we will embrace preprint and publish our work immediately. We will be accountable for our work by inviting people to critique our work early, and if there are issues, to bring it to us. We will advance the cause of reproducibility, which means we will identify if there are areas in our field, which was Huntington and Parkinson's disease, that require problems that need to be fixed. We would dedicate the time as a team. In science, it's not so, you don't get credit for any of this. You know, as a scientist, you get credit for making novel discoveries, not for repeating other people's work or proving whether it's right or wrong. And that we will collaborate both with academia and industry. And since then, you know, this has been, you know, the manifesto that guides our work. It's very difficult to do all of this if you don't have buy-in from the team. So I was very fortunate to have an impressive team. I don't think this can play, but of PhD students and postdoc that embrace this practice. And for every year, they dedicated about 20% of their time just to serving the community, whether it's development of tool, validating of data or models. And then after that, I began to interact directly with a Parkinson patient, Benjamin Stetcher. He heard about this experience and he asked to interview me for this. And it began a long-lasting relationship that you will see through the slide that, again, further transformed our view of Parkinson's disease. So from then on, every conference we organize in Parkinson's disease, it starts with a day engaging the patient, where the patients and the patient's families come and to see us. And this is one example of a Parkinson's disease conference that we organized, and these are 3 Parkinson's disease patients. One, Benjamin was diagnosed when he was 29. John Stafford on the right is actually a professor of neuroscience. What we also did, I don't know why the titles are not coming correct. What we also did is we brought the patients to the classroom. So every year we have regularly through the year patients that come and teach our PhD students to the disease. And I can tell you in the teacher's evaluation, this is the favorite class of the year for all of them. And this led us to the concept of open science and what we can do both as patients and researchers to open the process of research. So we worked on this over the years. We participated in panels together, but we even were bold enough to suggest new models of open research. In this paper that we jointly co-authored in Times Higher Education, we advocated for a new open science publication sort of method where we reverse the role of researchers and publishers. Generally, researchers are at the mercy of publishers. You submit your work until the publisher says, this is great work, nobody sees your work. And then you have to pay for it. So in this model, what we suggested is that all researchers should make their work immediately available online. That work should be open to critique by everyone, from students to postdoc, and there should be an interactive dynamic dialogue. And then the journals should invite you to submit their papers, which actually they're doing now. You know, they're scanning preprint and this. But moreover, that the process of publication should not have a dead end. Because in research, we have so much work that we do afterward that itself doesn't culminate into a full story that ends up getting lost. And that there should be a system where people are able to update their publication. And that ultimately this publication would not be the end game. And the incentive and recognition reward system, you know, will be more on the content rather than where the paper is published. My lab became very actively engaged in advocating for patients. This is one of the patients we work with, Eve. He led the campaign to walk through the Alps to raise money for Parkinson's disease. And unfortunately, last year, he lost his life to the disease, and this had a huge impact in the team. We've also opened up our lab to the media, to engage the media, and the group has participated in a number of documentaries on Parkinson's disease for TV and for radio station and this. So that's on the awareness side. Those of you who work in research, who don't work in research may not know this. One of the biggest problems in research today is a large body of the work we produce is actually not reproducible. You know, so it has been estimated, and this has an economic cost. In some fields, it can range between 20 to 50%, which means we're producing work, but if the work is not reproducible, is not robust, and if we build, whether it's discoveries, treatment based on this work, there is a huge economical and societal impact. And in some areas, this impact has been calculated. For example, in the field of research, one of the key tools we use to study human pathology and human disease are antibodies. These are different from the antibodies we use at treatment. They're the same, exactly the same, but they have a different purpose. And these antibodies are quite expensive, and very often they are very poorly validated. But the big part of the knowledge we develop about this disease is actually based on these antibodies. And it's, you know, there is part of what we call now the reproducibility crisis in science is driven by this. And that means there is huge amount of money that goes to the drain. But most importantly, it leads to us developing concept and hypotheses on unfounded facts. So my lab was one of the first groups to lead efforts just to take these important tools and try to validate them. We did this, we started with the concept of revisiting whether these tools are good, and move to developing better tools. We did this also with respect to models of disease, whether they're cellular or animal models. And this paper is actually an important paper because it's a paper where the team, we refuted two papers that were published in Nature and PNAS. In other words, there was a publication in Nature that was published and had promised to change the focus of the field, and it was beginning to affect how people are funded. And it was published by two teams, one at Harvard, one at Tufts University, and we were advised, we realized that their findings were wrong. And what we did is we assembled a team of 8 different research groups across the world to do this. And we showed that, in fact, their finding is wrong, and this paper has held its ground for the past decades. Okay. So what I wanted to say is quality is first. Why I say this? Because when I see quite a lot of open research and open science initiative in our region, the focus has remained basically on open access. And there is a huge societal, economical, and reputational risk if we don't start to focus on reproducibility and rigor, not also for advancing science. COVID-19 was a perfect example where open science, sort of the value of open science became clear. We saw that information about the sequence of the virus, the structure of the virus, comparing of different treatment, it was definitely essential to saving lives. But that's only one perfect story. Today, we are witnessing in the science, we have the problem of what we call the reproducibility crisis. So this year, Nature reported this, that the rate of scientific paper retractions has tripled over the past few years. Just last year, there were about 10,000 papers that were retracted, and this is before the application of AI, okay? And if we start to look at the list of these papers, I have a slide that's sort of missing. 2 of the top countries in this list, unfortunately, are from our region. Okay, the number 1 and number 5 are from the MENA region, and it's not important to mention the names. But what is important is that when we talk about a paper or a science being retracted, it means that it was found to be wrong. And the impact of this is tremendous. To give you an example, this is a paper that was published, I think in 1998, in which the scientists from the UK claimed that vaccination caused autism, okay? And because of this paper, many people will not take their kids to be vaccinated because they're afraid to have autism. And you think that once this paper was found to be wrong, that this would be corrected. Once you impact societal trust and confidence, it takes a long time to regain that. For example, this paper was reported in 1998. In 2000, he was testifying to the Congress about the effect of vaccines on autism. In 2002, people began to see that there is a problem with the findings of this paper, but it wasn't until 2010 that the paper was retracted. I didn't want to show the names, but they're there, okay? So the good thing about this is that out of this 10,000, 8,000 are from one publisher. And unfortunately, that publisher is from the region. It's now under Wiley. And the majority of retraction came from what we call is commissioned papers or guest editors. This is a situation where the journals ask a scientist to ask their friend scientists to contribute papers, and the quality of the reviews goes down. Now, just 2 weeks ago, the #1 scientist in neuroscience in the field was actually reported to have fabricated about 130 papers. This person was also the head of the National Institute of Aging controlling this. And there is about 800 papers and more than 600 people who collaborate with this person. So the impact, several of the drugs that went to clinical trial were based on findings from these papers, okay? Now, you think about that in terms of impacts of people's health. Think about it from the research point of view. People who published with this individual and, are hugely impacted because then your papers are equally labeled. Institutions from where these people have published now have to address and respond and issue corrections. And therefore, you have to deal with situation. This is something we have not paid attention to in our part of the world. And if they have one important message here, is that it's not important to provide only open access. We need to provide the awareness and the tools to help people ensure the quality of research, because certainly we cannot afford reputational damage of our institution at their stage of development and evolution at this stage. Now, why is all of this is coming so fast? It's actually because of AI. Because the way it was done before is people have to spot something, and then if you report it, then you're lucky if the editor will listen to you. This open research has changed. If you spot a problem today, you go to a website, you report it, everybody reads it, the other people report it, your institution is notified. And now with AI, people are scanning images to identify these sort of duplications and fabrications. And we're seeing an increase of use of AI or AI-assisted manuscript writing. Some of you have seen this paper that was published accidentally with the prompt from AI in the introduction, just to show that. And there was a second one. So with the proliferation of AI-generated text and AI-assisted writing and research, we're going to see now, that this problem will appear more and more. In fact, there are now several sites that are already scanning the literature to identify papers with plagiarism, duplication, and the list is mounting and mounting and mounting. And we have to. So in this sense, the response has been the growing reliance of AI-assisted quality vetting, which are set to transform research. So for example, the journal Science Now are implementing a tool, which is now actually the use is Proofig 8 to screen every single paper. So such a tool should be not at the disposal of publishers, but should be at the disposal of every research lab. And it certainly should be something that open access infrastructure should afford, because no one can afford to subscribe to this rule. Science is based on trust. If I work in a lab, I have 20 people. I have to trust people. But as Reagan said, always trust and verify. And it's so important that we have the tools. If we look at the cost of these tools, they are very prohibitive and beyond the resources available to researchers in our part of the world, where people are still paying from their pocket to publish. So if there is one thing I would urge my colleagues at the Qatar National Library and other academic institutions is to make this tool available to your researchers as soon as possible. Our reputation is at risk. So let's talk about open science in the MENA region. I've been following the work of the Qatar National Library for over the past 8 years, and I can't think of a better place to lead open science and open research than a library. And if you want to understand what I mean by this, all you have to do is take a walk at this library at 2 o'clock or come on the weekend, and you will see what you see. You see every single segment of society here. There is the policymakers, there is the father, there is the community, there is the patients, they're all here. And if we need to bring that community together in a place where everyone is comfortable to come, this is the right place. I think we have seen also around the Arab world, we see now both in the UAE, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Oman, there is now an increase in available of open access databases and repositories. But as I said, the focus remains primarily on open access. We're still lacking resources for data repositories. This is the number of repositories worldwide, and you can compare it to the number of repositories in the Arab world remains small. So there is a huge need to invest more in infrastructure. But in fact, these are the 4 or 5 main things that come into mind when I look at the landscape of open research in the MENA region. Most of the initiatives remain championed and driven by individual institutions, rather than a national or regional open science initiative. I mean, here, QNL has been generous in providing resources for people to publish, but the reality, it's not enough. There needs to be more national, sort of a national open research or open science policy that devotes more resources to the universities and this institution to address the needs of open research. It remains focused on open access to publication and literature, less on data, less on infrastructure, less on policy of research, and much less on integrity and reproducibility of research, which we still rely on the use of solutions rather than investing in creating our own solution that deals with our own requirements and needs and standards. Everything we do is we're basically adopting what's done in the West, not taking into context our own requirement and marginalizing our indigenous knowledge in the process. And there has not yet to address the linguistic barrier. I mean, 5% of the world are only native English speakers. 13% of the world are the people who speak English. And then all the open access is in English. So there is a huge role. And if we don't address these things, no one will address them for us. Okay. So let's talk about what I want. As I said, the main message I wanted to leave with you today is we need to innovate. We have the opportunity to innovate, and we must innovate, and we must be part of the frontiers of shaping this field. And what I try to do in the next few slides is simply try to highlight some of the opportunities where I still see some role of innovation. I think multilingualism is one of these. We know we have very few journals in Arabic. We have people who contribute very important scholarship in Arabic. They don't have the visibility. They don't have, the journals and the repositories to allow the researchers to publish their work in Arabic. And this is important for expanding open research participation and bringing our knowledge and expertise to the rest of the world. There is the knowledge translation. As I said, most of what we're absorbing is in English. There is very little translation into Arabic to reach the community and to reach the people beyond the academic sphere. And at the same time, there is very little translation of Arabic to English. And here, I think there is a huge opportunity now. We have some of the best Arabic language technologists here in Doha, and we have a translational institute in Qatar. And if you supercharge that with AI, that you have a unique opportunity to lead, at least in the region. On the data sharing and opens, I mean, there is a need to develop new models that prioritize open sharing. And one example for this is, the concept is always, we're too small, we have little resources, and we cannot compete with the rest of the world. But if you're small, then you need to compete in small things. Then you need to compete where you have a competitive advantage. And one of these areas, when we talk about open data, is open data. If you're able to develop repositories, a robust and rich data set in very specific area that is relevant to your population, then the entire world will come to you. You will be a leader in that field, and this will help you in terms of collaborate with global researchers, bring attention to your work, but moreover, bring resources to translate that knowledge into actions and solutions. So thinking at a scale is important, but thinking from a competitive edge and from societal need is equally important. Now, affordable open science. We talk about open science, open research. There are tools, there are equipment that were developed open science, but the reality is that most of these remain beyond the mean of our researchers in most universities in the Arab world. So given these financial constraints, it is crucial that we think about, again, how can we develop open science and models that prioritize accessibility and affordability? In terms of recognition and reward system in our academic system, despite the importance, the critical importance of this, we're still evaluating people simply based on the same Western standards, where you publish, how many you publish, not based on trying to pioneer and address societal needs. There is an opportunity to develop models based on affordable innovation, including low-cost scientific equipment and open resources like softwares and tools. And there is an opportunity to develop and share low-cost, accessible alternative to expensive scientific equipments. And the solution we develop don't have to stay here. They can be shared with the rest of the world. If there is one thing we have in the region that many people don't have, are conflicts. Okay? We have conflicts, we have natural disasters, we have human-made disasters, we have wars. We have no solutions for this. And no one is gonna come and solve this. Actually, if you do a search on open search and vulnerable region or conflict, there is not much. When we have a complete destruction of a higher education system, like what's happening in Gaza, what's the role of open science in reviving and rebuilding that education system? But most importantly, what's our role? There is open science, MOOCs and courses and things, but you need additional innovation to be able to bring the benefits of all of this to the people who are affected in these. On policy and innovation, we need to have our own policy and innovations for the region. It's not clear to me who's doing this. You know, who's championing this? And here there is an opportunity to do this, not only at a country level, but at the regional level, because we need to test different ways that we can incentivize and regulate open sharing in the context of our own institutions and our own cultures. So open science incubators, you know, if we want to innovate, we have to create the space and the resources and the support for people to innovate in this field. So developing and incentivizing businesses and venture capital to invest in developing incubators that can support people to develop and commercialize solutions for open science is crucially important, not only for us in the region, for the rest of the world. So there is a need for a consortia. I see quite a lot of effort. I see a lot of different countries and institutions sort of pioneering and championing very specific field, but there is a need. We cannot do it alone. As an institution, as a nation, and as a region, we need the collective brain to be able to solve this. So there is a need to create a regional consortia to advance all of these different elements of innovation and policy. And I think the most important part I'll finish with, where I started, is we need to do more to bridge the gap between science, academia, and society, and as an important, and bring in society not as a recipient of what we do, but an equal partners in the research process, and an equal partner in translating that knowledge into actions, solutions, and impact. And with that, I close, and thank you for it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hilal. Thank you so much for such an inspiring speech and amazing presentation. I'm sure that many of us here would love to hear and read more about Dr. Hilal. You can easily find this. I mean, I, for one, I couldn't help myself when I was translating his bio. I read a lot about him, and the more you read, the more you get inspired. So thank you so much, Dr. Hilal. And also thank you so much for each and every single one who is with us here today. We now have a coffee break, and we will return to this room for 2 high-impact roundtable sessions in half an hour. And just a gentle reminder regarding the registration for the library tour, please do pop up at the registration desk to reserve a spot if you wish to join us. Enjoy your break.